They say a person doesn't just disappear. There are signs, warnings, little things you only notice when it's too late. But I promise you, I had no reason to believe that morning would be any different. It was still dark when I stepped outside, the kind of early morning where the air feels too still, like the world is holding its breath. My dog, Luna, trotted ahead, her nose twitching as she sniffed at the damp earth. The streetlights flickered, buzzing like they were straining to stay awake. I tugged my hoodie tighter around me and started down the familiar path toward the woods behind the neighborhood. I had taken this route every morning for months. The trail wound through a patch of trees, their skeletal branches reaching out as if trying to snag me in their grasp. The air smelled of wet leaves and something faintly metallic, like rusted iron. Luna's ears twitched. She was always skittish in the woods, but this time, she stopped dead. "Come on, girl," I urged, but she whined, her body rigid, eyes locked on something deeper in the trees. I followed her gaze but saw nothing, just the yawning darkness of the woods. But then I heard it. A soft crunch, the sound of a footstep on damp earth. My pulse quickened. It could have been a deer or maybe another early walker, but something in the way the silence pressed in around me made me feel watched. I shook it off and tugged on Luna's leash. She resisted for a moment before reluctantly moving forward. The sensation of being followed stayed with me, a weight pressing between my shoulder blades. But every time I glanced back, I saw only empty space, nothing but shifting shadows and tangled branches. I should have turned back. I should have listened to Luna. But instead, I walked deeper into the woods. The sound came again, closer this time. A slow, deliberate step. My breath caught in my throat. I wasn't alone. A shape emerged from the trees, just a flicker of movement at the edge of my vision. My skin crawled. It was a man, standing just beyond the tree line, still as a statue. I couldn't see his face, only the outline of his body, tall and unmoving. "Hello?" My voice sounded small, uncertain. The man didn't respond. Luna growled, low and deep, the fur along her spine bristling. I gripped her leash tighter, my fingers slick with sweat. The man stepped forward, just one slow step, and that was enough. I turned and ran. Luna's claws scraped against the pavement as we sprinted back toward the houses. My lungs burned, my heart beat a deafening drum in my ears. I didn't dare look back. The moment I reached the street, the safety of the streetlights, I finally turned. The man was gone, but the feeling hadn't left me. The sense that someone had been watching, waiting. I told myself it was nothing, a trick of the dark. A man taking an early walk just like me. I had no way of knowing that I had already been chosen. I kept telling myself it was nothing, that I had overreacted, that my mind had played tricks on me in the dark. But no matter how much I tried to push the thought away, the unease sat heavy in my chest, like a stone. When I got home, I locked the door behind me and leaned against it, trying to catch my breath, my fingers still shaking as I unclipped Luna's leash. She padded toward her water bowl, but even she seemed unsettled, her ears flicking back every few seconds as if she was still listening for something just outside. I glanced at the window, dreading to see a shadow lurking on the sidewalk, a figure standing too still, too patient, waiting for me to notice him again. But the street was empty, bathed in the cold yellow glow of the streetlights. The trees swayed slightly in the wind, but that was all. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had followed me, that if I had run just a little slower, if I had hesitated just a moment longer, something would have happened, something I wouldn't be able to explain away. I went through the motions of my morning routine, showering, getting dressed, making coffee, but everything felt wrong. My skin tingled as if unseen eyes were still watching me, pressing against me from just beyond my sight. Every creak of my old house made me jump. The ticking of the clock on the wall seemed louder than usual. Even the hum of the refrigerator felt intrusive, like a sound I shouldn't be hearing, like something had slipped into my home unnoticed. Luna, always eager to curl up on the couch after her morning walk, instead sat by the door, her ears perked, her tail stiff. She whined low in her throat, the kind of sound she made when she sensed something that didn't belong. My stomach twisted. I walked over, placing a hand on her head, feeling the warmth of her fur beneath my palm, grounding myself in the familiarity of her presence. "There's nothing there," I whispered. But I wasn't sure if I was reassuring her or myself. I forced myself to go on with my day, heading to work and trying to drown the lingering unease beneath the normalcy of emails, phone calls, and the constant buzz of fluorescent lights. But even as I buried myself in the routine, the morning sat in the back of my mind like a splinter, too deep to remove. I kept checking the window near my desk, half expecting to see that dark figure standing on the sidewalk, looking up, waiting for me to meet his gaze. By the time I got home that evening, the tension in my shoulders had become a dull ache, my body exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with work. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Luna greeted me at the door, her tail wagging hesitantly, but something felt off. I locked the door behind me, twisting the deadbolt with fingers that felt numb. As I stepped into the kitchen, I noticed it immediately. Something was wrong. It wasn't anything obvious. Nothing was out of place. Nothing was missing. But the air was different. The scent of coffee from the morning still lingered, but underneath it, there was something else. Something faint but unmistakable. A scent that did not belong. It was the smell of earth, damp and heavy, like the forest floor after a storm. The same scent I had smelled that morning, out there in the trees. I stood there, my heart pounding in my throat, every nerve in my body screaming at me to run, to get out, to leave. But I didn't move. I forced myself to stay still, to listen. The house was silent except for the steady ticking of the clock on the wall, the distant hum of the refrigerator, the soft sound of Luna's breathing behind me. And then, just as I started to convince myself I was imagining it, I heard it. A whisper. Faint, almost too quiet to catch. Not words, not really. Just the breath of something shifting, just beyond the threshold of sound. Something waiting. Something watching. I turned, my pulse hammering, my breath shallow, but there was nothing there. Just the hallway, stretching toward my bedroom, the door slightly ajar, the darkness inside yawning like an open mouth. The scent of damp earth was stronger now, and I was no longer sure if I was alone. I stood frozen in the kitchen, every muscle in my body locked in place, my breath shallow, my ears straining to hear something, anything beyond the slow, rhythmic ticking of the clock. The scent of damp earth clung to the air, thick and unmistakable, curling in my nostrils like something pulled from the depths of the woods, something that should not be inside my home. Luna let out a low whimper, pressing herself against my leg, her body rigid, her head tilted slightly toward the dark hallway where my bedroom door stood ajar. I told myself it was nothing, that I had left the window open, that the wind had carried in the scent from outside, that my mind was playing tricks on me because I was still rattled from the morning, but deep down, I knew I was lying to myself. There was something unnatural about it, something invasive, like the air itself had shifted in a way it wasn't supposed to. My fingers curled into fists at my sides, nails biting into my palms as I forced myself to take a slow step forward, toward the hallway, toward the open door, toward the darkness beyond it. The floor creaked beneath my weight, the sound too loud in the suffocating silence. My own breath felt deafening. I reached out with a hand that trembled more than I wanted to admit, pushing the bedroom door open fully, letting it swing inward with a soft groan of old wood. The room was empty. Nothing was out of place. My bed was neatly made, the curtains drawn, the nightstand exactly as I had left it that morning. But the smell was stronger here, thick and damp, as if someone had stood in the center of the room, dripping with the scent of the forest. I swallowed hard, my mouth dry, my skin prickling with the undeniable sensation that I was being watched, that somewhere in the shadows just beyond my sight, something lingered, something waited. The air felt heavy, charged, the way it did before a thunderstorm, thick with the pressure of something unseen. Then, just as I turned to leave, I heard it. A single deliberate step, not from inside the room, not from the hallway, not from outside, but from above, the attic. My body went cold, the kind of cold that seeped beneath the skin, into the bones, into the very core of me. The attic, the one place in the house I never went, the space above my head that had been sealed shut since the day I moved in, its old wooden hatch secured with a rusty latch, its presence nothing more than an afterthought. Until now. Luna let out a soft, uneasy whine, her eyes locked upward, her tail stiff, her body pressing harder against my leg. She had heard it too. Another step. Slow. Deliberate. A shift of weight on old wooden beams. I backed away, my pulse hammering so hard I could hear it in my ears, my breath coming too fast, too shallow. My mind raced through 1,000 explanations, each one more impossible than the last. A squirrel, a raccoon, some animal that had found its way into the crawl space. But deep down I knew. I knew that wasn't the sound of an animal. That was the sound of a person. Standing in my attic, moving, waiting, watching. I bolted. I didn't stop to think, didn't stop to breathe, didn't stop to check if there was something behind me. I grabbed my keys off the counter with shaking fingers, threw open the front door, and ran, Luna at my heels, her claws scraping against the floor as we burst onto the porch and into the night. The cold air hit me like a slap, my lungs burning as I sucked in gulps of it, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. I spun, expecting to see movement behind me, expecting to see the attic door swinging open, expecting to see a figure standing in the doorway. But the house remained still. Silent. Too silent. The front door gaped open like a mouth, spilling warm light onto the porch, onto the overgrown grass, onto the cracked pavement of my driveway. The windows stared back at me, dark and empty, reflections of a house that should have been safe, a house that was mine. But it wasn't mine anymore. I knew, in the deepest part of me, that I had not been alone in that house. And worse, I knew that whoever or whatever had been there wasn't done with me yet. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my car with Luna curled beside me, her body pressed against mine, her breathing steady but tense, her ears twitching at every small sound. The street was quiet, the kind of eerie stillness that made me feel like the world had emptied itself out, like I was the only one left awake. I kept my eyes on the house, watching the windows, waiting for something, some shadow, some movement, some proof that what I had heard, what I had felt, had been real. But the house remained still, the darkness inside untouched, and that, more than anything, made my skin crawl. I told myself I needed to be logical. I needed to take control of the situation before it swallowed me whole. I would go back in the morning. I would check the attic. I would find something ordinary, an animal maybe, or some forgotten vent letting in the wind, and I would laugh at myself for being so afraid. That's what I told myself, but deep down, I already knew the truth. Morning came slow, the kind of gray, muted sunrise that barely cut through the mist hanging over the streets. I forced myself out of the car, my limbs stiff, my mind clouded with exhaustion. Luna stuck close to me as I stepped onto the porch, my fingers hesitating over the door handle before I pushed it open. The house smelled normal again. No damp earth, no scent of the woods creeping in where it didn't belong. Everything was exactly as I had left it. But that didn't mean anything. I went straight to the hallway, my heart hammering as I tilted my head back and stared at the attic door. It was shut, just as it had always been. But I knew what I had heard. I grabbed the small step stool from the laundry room, unfolded it beneath the attic hatch, and hesitated only for a second before reaching up and unlatching the old wooden door. It groaned as it swung downward. the dust raining down in soft, weightless specks, disappearing into the air like whispers. I held my breath. Nothing. The attic was empty. The single, bare bulb cast weak light over the exposed beams, the forgotten boxes, the old furniture draped in yellowing sheets. There was no sign that anyone had been there. No footprints in the dust, no shifted objects, just silence, a heavy, suffocating silence. And then I saw it. Not inside the attic, but just beyond the window, out in the distance, past my backyard where the woods stretched on endlessly, twisting into shadows. There, standing at the tree line, half hidden by the fog, was a figure. My body locked up, every instinct screaming at me to run, to get out, to put as much distance between myself and whatever was standing there. But I couldn't move. I could only watch as the figure tilted its head ever so slightly, as if acknowledging that I had seen it, as if waiting for me to react. And then, as the morning light shifted, cutting through the fog just enough, I saw the glint of something in its hands. A jar. A small glass jar, reflecting the pale sunlight, cradled carefully in long, unmoving fingers. I couldn't breathe. And then, just as quickly as it had appeared, the figure turned and slipped back into the trees, swallowed by the mist. The air in my lungs came rushing out all at once, leaving me dizzy, unsteady, my mind spinning. I knew, without a doubt, that I couldn't stay here. Not now. Not when I had seen him. Not when he knew I had seen him. I packed a bag in minutes, shoving clothes, my phone charger, my wallet into a backpack with shaking hands. I didn't know where I was going, but anywhere was better than here. Luna whined, pacing at the door as if she understood that we needed to leave. I barely noticed where I was driving, my hands gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles ached. The roads blurred past in a haze of exhaustion and panic. I needed to think. I needed to clear my head. I needed to understand what was happening. And somehow, without meaning to, I ended up at the one place I had promised myself I would never go. The barn. It had been abandoned for as long as I could remember, its weathered wood sagging, its roof half-collapsed, its broken windows gaping like empty eyes. People in town avoided it, said it was dangerous, said it was cursed. But now, sitting in my car, staring at it through the windshield, I felt something else. Not just fear. Recognition. Like I had been here before. Like something inside that barn was waiting for me. The wind howled through the trees, rattling the loose boards of the barn, making them creak and groan like something alive. And then, as I sat there frozen in my seat, trying to convince myself to turn around, I saw it. The door, slightly open, like someone was inviting me inside. I don't know why I stepped out of the car. Every part of me was screaming not to. Every survival instinct, every warning my mother had ever given me about dark places and strange men, about things that wait in the shadows where no one else is watching. But there was something about that barn, about the way the door stood slightly ajar, about the way the wind seemed to push me forward rather than hold me back, that made it impossible to turn away. It was as if I had already stepped inside long before I even reached the threshold, as if I had no choice. Luna hesitated, her paws scraping against the gravel, her body tense, her head low as she let out a small, uneasy whine. I bent down, pressing a hand to the side of her neck, feeling the rapid pulse beneath her fur, the warmth of her body grounding me even as the cold air seeped into my skin. "We're just going to look," I whispered. But even I didn't believe myself. The barn loomed before me, its wooden frame groaning under the weight of time. The air thick with the scent of old hay, dust, and something deeper, something heavier, something metallic that I didn't want to name. My fingers brushed against the rough wood of the door as I pushed it open just enough to slip inside. The creak of the hinges cutting through the silence like a whisper through a graveyard. The first thing I noticed was the cold. It was different from the chill outside. Not just the absence of warmth, but something deeper. Something that clung to my skin like damp cloth. Something that made the fine hairs on my arms stand on end. The second thing I noticed was the light. A single bulb, swaying slightly from the ceiling, casting long, shifting shadows across the dirt floor, across the old wooden beams, across the rows of shelves lining the walls. It took me a moment to understand what I was looking at. Jars, hundreds of them, lined up in neat, careful rows, their glass catching the dim light, reflecting it in small, eerie glints. Some were larger than others, some sealed with rusted metal lids, others with thick wax. Some were filled with clear liquid, others murky and dark, and inside each one, floating, preserved, unblinking, were eyes. I staggered backward, my breath caught in my throat, my stomach lurching violently as the realization crashed down on me all at once. They weren't just objects, they weren't just things. They were people, labeled. Each jar had a name written in careful, precise letters on a strip of aged paper, affixed to the glass with a meticulous hand. Some of the names were old, the ink faded, the paper yellowed and curling at the edges. Others looked new, fresh, as if they had been placed there only days ago. And then I saw it. The empty jar, sitting at the end of the shelf, its lid open, waiting for me. The sound of a footstep behind me sent ice through my veins, slow and deliberate. The scrape of a boot against the dirt floor. My breath came in short, uneven bursts as I turned, my pulse hammering so loudly I could barely hear anything else. And there he was. Samuel Crane. He was taller than I had expected, lean but strong, his face gaunt, his eyes deep-set, dark and unreadable. His hands were steady, careful, the kind of hands that belonged to someone who worked with precision, with patience, with purpose. He was holding something, cradled gently in his fingers, something small and round and unmistakable. A scalpel. His voice was soft when he spoke, almost tender. The kind of voice that could lull you into a false sense of safety if you weren't paying attention to the glint of the blade, if you weren't staring into the empty jar that bore no name. "I knew you would come," he said. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Luna growled, a deep, primal sound, the kind that spoke of something older than fear, something instinctive, something that recognized the monster standing before us for exactly what he was. And then she lunged. Everything happened at once. The snarl, the sharp cry of surprise, the scalpel clattering to the floor as Luna's teeth found flesh, the sudden frantic scramble of movement as I turned and ran, my body finally breaking free from the paralyzing grip of terror. I didn't look back. I didn't stop. I sprinted through the open door, into the cold morning air, into the trees, the branches tearing at my clothes, at my skin, the sounds of struggle fading behind me as I ran for my life. I don't know how long I ran. Time became meaningless, distance irrelevant. All that mattered was getting away, putting as much space between me and that barn as possible, between me and the man who had been waiting for me, between me and the empty jar that had been meant to hold my name. It was Luna who saved me. If she hadn't been there, if she hadn't attacked, if she hadn't given me those few precious seconds to escape, I don't know what would have happened. But I do know this. They found him. Days later, after I finally told the police, after the search teams went out into the woods, they found the barn. They found the shelves, the jars, the names. They found the tools, the bindings, the darkened stains on the floor that spoke of things no one wanted to say out loud. They found everything, but they didn't find him. Samuel Crane was gone. And even now, even with the barn locked away behind police tape, even with the town trying to forget, even with my own desperate attempts to move on, I know he is still out there, watching, waiting, looking for another pair of eyes to collect.